is a true friend. Some of you might know who I'm referring to, who I run to in times of need, who is a love in my life, Bita. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to see what my husband's reaction is. That's my husband over there. He is all those things and more. But Bita, of course, is my longtime friend. And it's so nice to have her here. And I'm going to be honest with you. She's got a bio that I actually don't even understand. It goes right over my head. If I had a bio for Bita, it would be that if anybody wanted to get something done at any level in their corporation, and they couldn't, and it was just deemed as impossible, they would go to Bita. That is her bio. But I'm going to read you a little bit about Bita. Bita leads tech operation teams to build intuitive processes and automated systems at Reich, a Citrix company. She has served as a process improvement change agent at Merrill Lynch, Kofax, Lexmark, and Altium, with an emphasis on helping transactional SaaS companies transform their sales systems and strategies. Notably awarded for her merger and acquisition partnership with Vista Equity and Thoma Bravo, Bita received a bachelor's in economics and an MBA with a certificate in entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of California, Irvine. And as a member of the Baha'i Faith, she serves by continuing to coach first-generation graduates and women of color through their corporate recruiting process. Give it up for Bita. And the gentleman next to her, I don't know what we did to deserve his presence. In fact, he is one of the most down-to-earth special souls that I know, that I have had the grace and honor to e-meet. I say e-meet because this is the first time that we've actually met. We've worked together before, but this is the first time we're seeing each other in person. And yeah, and this is a little bit about Mr. Steve Sarowitz, billionaire and philanthropist, founder and chairman of Paylocity, a leading U.S. provider of payroll and HR solutions. In addition, Steve also serves as the CEO of Blue Marble, an international payroll provider, and as director of PayEscape, a UK payroll provider. He's also an international philanthropist with an interest in promoting unity by promoting universal education and advocating for the elimination of racism, sexism, nationalism, and religious prejudice. 3 days after declaring as a Baha'i, a friend recommended that Steve make a film about the Baha'i faith. Steve immediately began a new career in the film industry. He helped fund and promote the documentaries He Named Me Malala, Rosenwald and Brightness of Noon. He assisted as the executive producer for the award-winning documentary Maya Angelou and Still I Rise, and led the efforts behind the groundbreaking documentary about the founding of the Baha'i faith, The Gate, Dawn of the Baha'i Faith. And last but not least, he's the love of my life. He gives meaning to the reason why I breathe. And he is the human I cannot live without, even if it is just because he's the only man that I know that will wake up 5 times in the middle of the night for his then pregnant wife to make her grilled cheese sandwich. And I actually think that should be his bio. But no, alas, there is more. This is Blake Khalili Warma. Only 5 years since graduating college as an engineer, Blake Khalili Warma has devoted himself to innovating an aging construction and real estate industry. And that's really aging. Like the industry has white hair all over. Building his own companies from the ground up, utilizing technology to streamline operations, leveraging new organizational structures, and seeing all projects and revenue streams through the lens of social impact. With the help of co-owner and his wife, Nava, together in 1 year have started Solstice Group, which owns Solstice Productions and Solstice Building. Solstice Building was built with strong moral ties to over 15 employees, all of which are Black, Indigenous people of color, and contributed to over 10 different nonprofits on behalf of the completed construction projects, while also serving companies like Apple, Boeing, and Target. As CEO of Solstice Building, Blake is rapidly growing this socially conscious real estate and construction company in hopes of revolutionizing the way we see building through the lens of social impact, and eventually to emphasize every spiritual aspect of a physical space. From serving small families to multi-billion-dollar organizations, his work revolves around the idea of inclusivity of all of society. Are we ready to roll? Should we start? Okay. So we're going to ask just a few questions, and not all the questions need to be answered by the by the panel, just those that speak to them. And I'll just be keeping a little bit of time. But then at the end, it'd be wonderful if we can open up the floor to anyone that might have questions here that they'd want to discuss, or any comments they might even have. We want to make sure that we're learning from each other. So the first question is, the following is a quote from Abdul Baha. He is the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. This is the quote. Every business should be established on divine principles. Its foundations should be trustworthiness, piety, and truthfulness in order to protect the rights of the people. What does it mean or look like to run or work within a business that has a spiritual purpose? Whoever would like to step up first to chat.
You know, when I think about having a spiritual purpose, can you guys hear me? You know, I think oftentimes about our true identity. And I know that at least in the Baha'i faith, we think of our true identity being that of our spirit. And when I think of the life of the spirit, I think of clarity, I think of vision, I think of guidance that we have. And then I don't understand how that's not just automatically taken into the business world, right? Like, we need leaders who are clear, who have guidance and have vision. So for me, I think it's just an organic thing to have businesses that are run on spiritual purposes. And I think a lot of that depends on the individuals running those businesses. Do they value the life of their spirit before their identity as a CEO, as a leader, as a man, as a woman, or whatever material identity they're?
We are primarily spiritual beings, and therefore, if we look at the material world, we are lowering ourselves to that of animal. And so what makes human beings unique on the plane is that we have a higher purpose and a higher calling. And our higher calling is not to be the richest, not to be the most famous, but to help all of God's creation. And along the way, we can make lots of money. In fact, women-owned businesses do better than male-owned businesses. In fact, investing in diversity is a huge thing. My wife and I invested in something called an ETF for the NAACP, and we made a 70% return over 3 years. My most recent business is called Wayfarer Studios, which I own in conjunction with Justin Baldoni, who became famous on Jane the Virgin. And we put the Baha'i principles right into our business right from the start. One of them is that we don't backbite. Honesty was mentioned. We put that right in. These are our main principles. Every employee knows this. Justin and I are Baha'is. Most of our employees are not Baha'is. What's very interesting is that we had an employee who was in a high-level senior position, and he wasn't following along the Baha'i principles. He did in name, but in his actual actions, particularly towards women, he was not doing that. And it was the loudest voice to change things. We actually had this with a couple of employees, was from our employees who were not Baha'is, who had taken our principles and made them their own. You see, the principles of all religions are one. And the principles of kindness, love, generosity, honesty, justice, all of them are in all religions, in Christianity and in Islam and Baha'i, and all of them lead to success. And that's the other thing, tremendous success. Is in retrospect, you can be good and you can win. And if you can't be good and you win, you haven't won at all.
I think just to add on to what they both have said, it really comes back to leaders, and I can speak only to myself. When I'm looking, you know, we are a young company that is growing. So as we grow, I continually ask, Nav and I continually ask, are we making these decisions to benefit us as a family, or are we making them to hopefully in decades of time benefit the greater of humanity? And I think if all businesses, the leaders, the founders, the CEOs, whoever it is, looked at their decisions in that perspective, I think we would start to see a whole shift in the decisions that are made and some of the things that we see that we maybe don't agree with. I think it really comes back to the leaders and what is their perspective on the decisions that are making.
that, oftentimes when we think of these decisions that leaders are making or people in the business world are making, we expect them to make it from, for example, what will profit the shareholders, or what will profit, frankly, our own egos. But if we're making those decisions based on what the right thing to do is, now whether you want to call it spiritual principles, moral ethics, your wording of the day, I like to quote my favorite show right now, Ted Lasso, where he tells Sam, of course, doing the right thing is never the wrong. And if we keep that in mind as leaders, as business owners, as fellow colleagues and employees, if we're doing the right thing, it's never going to be the wrong thing. So those employees who did speak up on behalf of their colleagues did the right thing.
And to quote Dwight Schrute, if an idiot would do a thing, do not do that thing. By the way, just Dwight Schrute, the actor who played, is also a Bosch, Rainn Wilson.
I think, can I just comment on this too?
Yeah.
I'm not a panelist. Welcome everyone. Please come join us. So nice to see you. Oh, we heard, but we're so glad you're here. No, of course. I think all too often we actually demote this word of spirituality to something that is purely superficial, something that is this airy-fairy abstract concept that is just used to calm the nerves and make people feel nice. But what spirituality does is, because it sits at the core of our existence, as what some of you have mentioned, what it does is it promotes this idea of oneness, that we're all connected. It promotes generosity in the workplace, in society. It promotes humility. It is in such a way, when it's implemented, it actually removes selfishness. So spirituality is actually this incredibly powerful mechanism and tool to run a productive business, to run a productive family, to run a productive society. And I think we don't see it that way. We see spirituality and business as dichotomies.
It's an ideological principle, but it's not tactical. Whereas it's actually a very tactical thing, like you just said.
Second question. As entrepreneurs, business leaders, and visionaries, paint us a picture of a world where material wealth and aspirations are advancing faster than our spiritual health. What does it look like, and what is the danger?
I think the picture is pretty clearly painted for us in the society we live in right now. So does anybody know what a disease of despair is? Anybody? I'll tell you, I'm sure. So suicide, anything related to despair, depression, all of these things, people are dying of despair. I mean, just let that sit with you for a second. That's a really sad thing to think about. When you think about despair, what is the antidote of despair? It is faith. Faith tells you that at the end of this dark tunnel, there is light. And not only is there light, but there's a meaning that we can prescribe to maybe this dark time that we are in. And if we continue down this path where we cannot find the light at the end of the tunnel, it's only going to get worse. We cannot have thriving communities, thriving businesses if diseases and deaths of despair continue to increase. That is just a very sad thing to think about. But I think we have the tool available, and I think it's faith and spirituality, whatever form that may take. I think we need to be able to find again that light at the end of the tunnel through faith.
In this society, many people have moved away from religion. And so, especially among young people, a lot of people say, I don't believe in religion and I don't believe in God. And I say, I don't believe in the God you don't believe in. I don't believe in a God of war, of conflict. I don't believe in a God that goes against modern science and logic and reason. I don't believe in a God that's intolerant and harshly judgmental. But I do believe in love and kindness, mercy, compassion, justice, peace, truth. That's the spirituality he was talking about. And I believe that's what Jesus Christ was teaching. That's what Moses was teaching. That's what Muhammad was teaching. And that's what Baha'u'llah was teaching. And in this world, we have moved away from traditional religion, especially among youth. And among youth, I have two 18-year-olds. In my high school, it was a crisis. So, and my kids are now in college, but the mental mental health. It was just the mental hospitals were overflowing with kids from my high school, literally to the point where my friend had a daughter who was suicidal and she waited all day to see a doctor. And this was not an uncommon occurrence. And yet we have this incredible world out there with this incredible technology. So this is exactly the world where we've advanced. And I live in a wealthy community. This is a community where materially we're lacking for very little, and yet the kids are hurting so badly. They're not hurting for the next meal, most of them. They're not hurting, you know, they have a nice roof over their heads. We live in a beautiful area. We filmed Ferris Bueller. I live in Highland Park, Illinois. Ferris Bueller and Risky Business. It's a lovely, lovely area. But we have a crisis of the spirit. This is a worldwide crisis of the spirit. And I'll just say one more thing, and that is take a look at COVID. Take a look at all the divisions and anger and angst over COVID and the arguments and the fact that we in America have access to vaccines and yet poor countries don't. Are we not all children of God? Are we not all living on this earth together? Are we not our brothers and sisters? What religious teaching teaches that that person is not your brother or sister? Is someone living in Guatemala or Honduras just as worthy to get a vaccine as I am as a wealthy American? And could we have done this differently if we were more spiritual? That's a question for all of you.
I contemplated not answering this one because I struggle with it, if I'm honest. I don't see the advancement of one's career or maybe attaining more material wealth inherently spiritually unhealthy. Having said that, I think, so I agree with what both of you have shared. And on top of that, I think it's important to understand what arena we're operating in, right? The arena we're operating in, we know it's going to disintegrate and a new one is building at the same time. And so while we build that new arena of spiritual qualities and values and virtues that will inherently be a part of that new arena, I can be honest with myself that I know how to operate in the old arena. For some reason, I'm actually okay at it. The joke amongst my friends is that I have a 50-year-old white man somewhere deep down inside me that's able to keep up with some of the men in the corporate world. Does that mean that I don't operate in that arena because I know I'm supposed to be building the other one? I don't know. I like the idea of being able to build the new arena with cranes instead of toothpicks. We need material means to build the new arena. So I struggle with that because not everyone can maybe operate in an arena or a world that is run by a patriarchal system of economic systems that don't value equity and that run on privilege. I recognize that. Does it kill your soul to operate in that arena? Then don't do it. Go build a new arena. Can you maybe operate in both? I don't know. And I think there's a level of self-awareness, frankly, that you need to have to be able to answer this question. Is it actually spiritually unhealthy for me to go after that material success and means to then be able to write big checks for any profitable charitable organization that can help build that, right? So I struggle with it. I don't know if I have an answer for a panel on that.
And I wonder if the spiritual health of the world, if it advanced at the same pace as the material world, whether it would create instances and circumstances that would be even more conducive to you in ways that you didn't even know. Because right now you're thriving. Obviously, you're sitting at this table. I know who you are, and you are incredible at taking rocks and turning them into gems. And if the world was advancing spiritually as much as it was materially, what would that, how much more would you be able to thrive? Yeah. This is another question. It is a common societal narrative that obtaining massive amounts of wealth is not synonymous with ethical and moral practice. As if there is a view that you cannot acquire and retain a mass amount of wealth without harming a sector of society in some way, or contributing to the gap between the wealthy and the impoverished. Please discuss.
Let's do it.
Well, since I am the one who's accumulated a massive wealth, so I was named on the Forbes 400 this year for the first time, and that's a badge of honor, I imagine. I was very conflicted because for me as a Baha'i, it says very clearly that we have to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor in our writings. And the writings say that the rich, but for a few, will actually benefit from their wealth. Baron Rothschild came to Haifa, where Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, was. He wrote about it. I just read about it this week. He said that Baron Rothschild was spending all his time running after his wealth. He didn't have time to enjoy it. He was essentially a slave to his own wealth. And it's very rare, said Abdul Baha, that a wealthy man can be detached. This is my goal every day, to be detached from my own wealth, but also to give it away. And so we have two family foundations. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving a check. I think there's something wrong with trying to accumulate wealth just to give out checks. I think we should work hard. I think we should produce. And if that production results in wealth, we should share that wealth. And along the way, help the world as you go. My goal, which is a hard goal now, is to give away the great majority of my wealth before I die. So we have a family foundation, and I just started Wayfarer Foundation for my Baha'i giving, which Justin and I will both give to. Now it's mainly me as our production company grows, it'll be both of us. And the idea is to take the Baha'i principles and put them into play. It is a lot of work. And so what I would say is, I don't know why anyone would want to do that, because most people would rather go to the beach on weekends. But I rarely get to do that. And as our giving grows, it'll be even harder. I think it's a great challenge. But for me, that's a challenge that I relish. And I think that I feel like a responsibility that I've been given with all this great wealth. With great wealth comes great responsibility. And it's probably the biggest responsibility I feel is to always increase my spirituality. When I give the wealth away and how I give that wealth away will be infused with spiritual teaching.
I really respect that you took that on and went ahead and answered that. And the reason why is every single one of these questions, I think, could be answered with, are we comfortable getting uncomfortable? Can we sit in the discomfort of some of the realities that we live in? And part of that is taking on the question, addressing the elephant in the room, but also beyond that, knowing that, yeah, with great wealth comes great responsibility, and that in continuing to lead Wayfarer and onward, there will be difficult times, there will be difficult decisions. And to be able to hold that and sit with it is a capacity that I think we will need for a spiritual arena, or this new arena, this new world order that we want to bring about. If we're doing that, it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies. We have to be able to have the difficult conversations, feelings, right? Like being self-aware enough to know what that means for you, and that you want to continue to build that spirituality for yourself. I think that's a huge thing for us to be able to take away, is that we all need to be, and the Baha'i writings tell us as well, to bring ourselves to account each day. It's not saying, let's bring ourselves to account once a quarter. Let's bring ourselves to account when we're fasting. No, it might be a difficult quarter. Company might have shat the bed. Are we as a company, are we as individuals still bringing ourselves to account? Are we still able to hold the difficult reality of that having just happened, or a pandemic hitting us unexpectedly? And how do we still lead values, morals again?
They both hit it on the head. I don't really have anything to add other than I think the Baha'i writings had it right. shouldn't be able to accumulate mass amounts of wealth and be able to eat next to somebody who's impoverished. I don't believe it's amoral to have wealth, because I think that's a skill maybe certain people have, and we must use that and then contribute it back to society. But as somebody who has not accumulated mass amounts of wealth, I think maybe my opinion is not that valid.
When I was your age, I had a net worth of zero.
I got you beat.
Next question. The equality of men and women is a spiritual principle in the Baha'i faith. The pandemic disproportionately disadvantaged women in the workplace. Millions of American women have left the workplace since the epidemic. That's 400,000 more women than men. Disruptions to schooling, daycare, and after-school programs force the majority of childcare and housework needs onto specifically mothers. All women continue to be underpaid relative to men and are still promoted to management positions at far lower rate than their male counterparts. Question A, why should the gender inequalities within our business structures be of concern to our businesses and wider society?
I have so much to say. The why is you're missing out on half of humanity's capacity of their clear leadership qualities. Look at any household. And I don't know that there's any one answer for why. There are a lot of reasons why. But what I can tell you is that, at least anecdotally, because I don't know the data off the top of my head, is during the pandemic, I have witnessed women who had to stay home, not because they wanted to, but because there wasn't really any other option. Now, chicken or the egg, where does that start? Does that start with the fact that there wasn't affordable childcare available? Does it start with the fact that men need to step up at home? Does it start with the fact that women had to make that choice, not alone, but because the man at the household made more than the woman, right? Like, why are we still talking about this in 2021? If you're not outraged by this, you're either asleep at the wheel, you're part of the problem, you're sitting on privilege at this point. I don't know. It's a tough question to ask, particularly as a woman. And I'm one of the most assertive, outspoken, confident women I know. And I was also underpaid at multiple companies unknowingly. That really ticks me off. Why did I just this summer had to do another kind of pay adjustment? Why does that have to be a thing? Are we thinking, and by the way, again, this can start at home. This doesn't have to be just dad. This has to be our brothers, our uncles, our grandfathers, our male friends of families. Are you stepping up to help out? And then at work, if you head any company or any department and you don't know about this, if you haven't heard about it yet, please, Monday morning, 8 a.m., go and ask your head of HR. I want a list. I want a report that shows me all of our employees. Luckily, gender, you should be able to tell, are our women, are our people of color, if that data is available to you, paid dollar for dollar the same as our white men? Yes or no? Don't wait for a DE&I expert, a consulting company that you have to go hire and pay a lot of money for. No, go run the report. And I'm not just talking big businesses. I'm talking about people with 10 employees. I'm talking about people with 20 employees. If you are not paying your women equitably, and then during a pandemic, mom and dad, or I'm trying to not be cisgender kind of specific, but I'm not very good at that, right? Like if two people have to make a decision based on pay, and most of the time, it's the woman in the household that's paid less. I have no words. I'm outraged by it. So I don't know how to answer this question.
You mentioned DEI, and the way we approach DEI is we are all leaning into it very publicly, especially big companies. I'm chairman of a publicly held company. I think that's good and bad. in the sense that a lot of times we're giving lip service to DEI, and we need to live DEI. And part of that we talked about spirituality, every part of your life. DEI needs to infuse every part of your company. I will say this: I started a company with no thought about DEI in 1997. Retired whoever was good. I didn't care whether you were white, black, woman, or a man. It just so happened that I ended up with all white men in my management, just coincidentally, like everyone else next to me, by the way. Not you guys, but at the time in 1997, if you did that and companies did that, and DEI wasn't a thing. So I'm proud to say with Wayfair, we leaned into it. And I've actually had friends, I've said, I very clearly said, put my finger on the scale. And what I mean by that is we hire women for management positions. We look for a woman. We look for a person of color. You have to do that. And the reason why my company ended up with all white men in power was not because I hated women or I hated people of color, because I went to my network and I went to the people that had experience, and guess who had all the opportunities was white men. And so if we're going to reverse the situation as it is, you need to lean into it, and you need to lean into it on a daily basis. And I think one thing you said, which I really agree with wholeheartedly, is you don't wait for DEI to fix it. You fix it up front, you fix it every day, you live it every day, and understand that it is, she's exactly right. Another thing you said is that we lose 50% of the workforce. That's 50% of your productivity. What business would want to do that? How would you like it if every airplane you flew on, take out 50% of the engines? We might land okay.
And what an example, because we know the analogy of the bird, right? Women and men are like two wings of a bird. So we are literally flying with one wing at this point, or one engine.
I will say that we are going back and retrofitting that company that started in 1997, fighting to fix it. I'm not proud of the fact that we have to do that. It's something we're submitting. We were successful at first in doing this, but having had a chance to start over again with Wayfair, right from the ground up, we're building it right, building it with gender equity and equity.
This meeting is being recorded.
The question, it doesn't pass me that there's some irony in this question as a man sitting here. I actually would really love the opportunity, because Nava and I have had some really great thoughts about this. I would love, Nava, for you to talk about this, because no, I mean, look, I've got an answer prepared, but as we're talking, I'm just thinking about, like, again, like, what my opinion is not nearly as valuable as listening, which is kind of the next point.
Well, I love you. Please answer the question, and I will add to it.
It goes back to what both of them have said. We cannot reach our highest heights if we're only flying with 50%. And that is, to me, there's definitely reason for outrage. But as a, when I'm looking at our own company, Nava and I's own company, when I'm thinking about how can we reach heights as fast as possible, it's definitely not, all right, let's disable one of the engines and fly with one of them. That is certainly not the right, that's not the thing that comes to mind. So there's a very specific set of skills that women bring that men just don't have, or they have less of. That's the whole idea behind society. There's there's a reason for that. So women bring a set of skills that men just don't have, and I'm not sure that there's more that the question needs than that.
I'm going to speak to the fact that, about you then, Blake came home one day. Two of our best maintenance technicians are women. And Blake made it very clear. He was reading a book called The Invisible Women, which he tells everybody. I haven't even read this book, but it's by Caroline Perez. And it talks about all the ways that we don't even know in research development, in systems and structure in the world, how women are disadvantaged. And he was saying, it's like, honey, those Milwaukee drills that everyone's got that they're holding, it's not even built for the hand of a woman. The way that they're researched and developed and built is for the hand of a man. And he's like, and this is our best technicians. Imagine, he's like, I would just love if we could develop tools and equipment for our women to thrive even more. And I feel like, we were even talking about hormone cycles. We even talked about how the, yeah, why don't you tell them what you learned about hormone cycles?
This was earlier today, last night, when we were talking about it, but essentially the male hormone cycle is a 24-hour period. The female hormone cycle is 28 days. So I know just from my own life, right? There's these times of the day that I can focus better, I can communicate better, I can do all of these things. So if that was the case, it would seem kind of clear that like we could relatively easily accommodate the 28-day, if that is true. Like, why not allow women the opportunity to perform their best? If this is really going to change things, it would not affect me at all.
Yeah.
There would be no negative impact to me. So, I mean, it seems like, again, it comes down to like learning about it and then taking action on that. How do we really take action? I think it's kind of maybe it's complicated, maybe it's not, but I think we just have to do it.
Can I add more?
Yes, please go ahead.
So excited you brought that up because it's true. It affects our lives every month. And there are the hormonal kind of fluctuations and the reality of what it means to live as a woman, right? And I'm not going to talk about it, but if you want to learn more about it, there are experts. Dr. Jolene Brighton, Elisa Vitti has a TED Talk about this. Learn about it if you have a woman in your life. It's important. But beyond that, what I want to bring up is we've talked about money, or I made sure to bring that up because I'm very passionate about it. But I know at least at Citrix, we talk about the M&M, right? People leave money in managers. So if we're paying our women accurately, there's another piece to it. It's not just that. It's, do our managers recognize that there's a different way that women operate? Are they sensitive to that or aware of it? Or I don't know the answer to that. But the reason I mention that is managers may or may not be aware of hormonal cycles, but they can treat women well. I've had a manager call me little girl in a conference room. What? Okay. I handled it. It's okay. Unfortunately, I curse like a sailor. It works out. Unfortunately, I had to do that to hold my own in the conference room, right? Why do I have to do that to hold my own in the conference room? Why do I have to lean on these more masculine, kind of strong essence of ways of operating? Why can't I lead with love and compassion and empathy and the emotional intelligence that I know that I have, but I can't bring to the conference room because there isn't space for it? Are we as managers making space for women who have voices, who people of color who have voices? They're not the voiceless, but are we making space for their voice to be heard? Yes or no? Right? So the money thing needs to be addressed. Management needs to be addressed. The leaders need to take accountability and responsibility for them. And by the way, I have worked for many companies who do really great management sessions about how to be a good manager. And that manager took that session and still called me little girl.
That goes to the point that I made about DEI. DEI is something you live every day. It's not window dressing. You have to live every day. Really, it's not just one lesson on how to do it. It's an ongoing thing, an ongoing management, and an ongoing transformation.
And I want to add more. This is such an important topic. It's also not just on leaders and men, it's also on women. And I really want to be careful about how I say this because I've had 2 women managers who also held me back in certain ways. And there's a girl code to a certain extent. You help fix another woman's crown. You help lift her up, even if that means she surpasses you in the workforce. Because I have had men who have helped me and been my champion and allowed me to surpass them in certain ways. And I'm grateful for that. But I also want to make sure that women are not tearing each other down in the workforce in the name of competition.
And that's such an important point. I tell Bita all the time that the greatest pains in my life and in the workplace actually come from women. And what it's important to note where the root is from, like what is the root cause of that? We live in a patriarchal society in which has sent the message to women that there are only few spots up at the top for you, for women. There's only a few spots. So we're put in this place where we're pinned against one another to compete with one another because we say, well, if you thrive, then there's no space for me. And that again comes back to this idea of ego. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, second part of the question, which I actually think, this is the question. I'm going to let you decide whether we've already answered it already. What changes are any of you planning to take or are taking in your work and place of business to work against this crisis in the inequalities of women in the workplace?
I mean, we've heard some, but I also want to offer more for those in the audience and also at home, because I think it's important to have tactical things that we can take away from it. I don't want it to just be a passionate venting session. There's also mentorship. There's also sponsorship and being champions for women in the workforce. And I think that goes both at home and at the workplace. I have to reiterate that it has many times been men who gave me the opportunity to be in a certain meeting that I wasn't supposed to be in, or part of a conversation that I probably was not supposed to be a part of, but they saw my value, they saw my capacity, they believed in it. And frankly, one of them didn't necessarily believe in it, but said, hey, I'm going to coach you through this. We're going to get through it together, right? So it takes that consciousness and that awareness to be able to go ahead and pay people correctly, make sure they have managers that are making a safe space. And this is nothing new. The data is in, right? Like, this isn't just anecdotal Bita getting passionate up here. The data is in, listen to what Adam Grant has to say. If you're not familiar with this, read Adam Grant's books. We should have heard about Sheryl Sanders by now. Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, Dan Price, follow him on Twitter. What he is sharing is evidence. We have, the data is in. We need women in the workforce. We need them to be paid properly. We need them to have spaces that are safe for them to be assertive, outspoken women and to have a seat at the table. Because I will lean in, Sheryl Sandberg. I will lean in and I will keep using my voice. But it's also kind of nice when someone else can also help me along that path. And I think we need more sponsors, mentors, people to make space at the table.
As a man, and I would say to all men in this audience, we need to work on ourselves. My partner, Justin, has written a book called Man Enough, and it really talks about men embracing some traditionally female qualities. How are we going to talk about our emotions? How are we going to shut ourselves off? Men are taught to be tough and stoic. We're taught to eat, we need to hunt, and we need to kill. And in this age, it's time for men to become not necessarily female. We could still be strong men, but to adopt some of these beautiful female traits. A couple other points I want to make is that women are a really good investment. Female entrepreneurs do better than men. There's a lot of statistics on that. We also do microloans. And unfortunately, and this is really, again, going back to men learning, but microloans are almost exclusively given out to women because men will drink them away or chase women or gamble. It's very unfortunate. And I think that's a microcosm of often what happens in the workplace. I would have to say consistently throughout my career, some of my best employees and coworkers have been women. Our job as men to recognize that, to not make them invisible, to also work on ourselves, and to make sure that we as men, one of the problems, I have a freshman in college, and one of the problems that Justin talks about in his book is assault of women. That's a big thing for college women. And it's always said that women need to protect themselves. This is not a female problem. Of course, I'm saying this with a little emotion because I have an 18-year-old daughter. And it's not her problem. It's not her problem that she's beautiful. This is a male problem. And there's many problems like that. I'm not saying men are the devil. I am one. I try not to be, although my wife might differ some days. But we just need to work. What part of our contribution to this problem is that we really need to work on it.
Can I just add one thing to that? I think one thing that we have often seen from well-intentioned individuals who really want to create space for women is this idea that I want to create space because it's fair. I want to create space because it's just, because women have been oppressed. We have to get to that next level of understanding that I need to create space because my business, my enterprise will not thrive without women. There are things that she brings to my business, the things she brings to a family, to an organization that no man can bring. So I need them. They don't need us. And to get to that level is really what we need to strive to do.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yeah.
She knew when she asked me to be on this panel what was going to happen. Yes to that, and
Yeah.
women need to take that space
Yeah, yeah.
because it's important for them to step up in those roles or spaces, and it's okay for you to take space.
And don't worry about being called aggressive and ruthless.
Are we going to talk about Tahir?
No, yeah.
You should. You're a good storyteller.
No, let me ask this final
Yeah,
question, and then we'll. What has been your greatest spiritual test in the workplace, and what did you learn?
Yeah, I'll go first. Just coming off a greatly testing last couple of weeks, it goes back to, my answer on kind of these issues around despair, faith, just having faith. And I'm not talking just about, anything in specific, but, when things get challenging, as a small business, I'm sure a lot of you know what it was like at some point, or do know right now what it's like to run a small business. And in today's climate, it can be really, really challenging in a lot of ways. So, just practicing faith, it's been hard for me, like to know that, hey, we're going to get out of this on the other side. It's going to be ugly. We're going to get beat up. But every time we've done it and we've made it through whatever that challenge was, you feel a little bit stronger and you feel like, okay, we can move on now to the next challenge. But that has been by far and away my biggest challenge, is just knowing that reaching that next step is not impossible, and we can do it together.
I guess I've had a few tests, most of them, I don't think. But over the years, I've been involved in several lawsuits. I guess one of my biggest challenges is understanding that not everyone's on the same page. Bita, that it's hard sometimes to live in a world where not everyone is a lot of spiritual. Deal with people who are not necessarily like them. I get to still love them. Maybe not like them, but to still love them. And for me, maybe one big test is harmful ways to end.
I have a lot of spiritual tests. And I think it's important for us to answer this question because it's important to know that everyone struggles. And for me, it's using the power of discernment to know when to lean in and use the more assertive masculine qualities if needed, and when to lead with empathy and compassion and to hold the duality. And I don't mean masculine or feminine in gender sense. I mean it in the essence of what we all have, the yin and that yang that we all have within us. And to be honest, I was raised in a masculine world where the greatest beat on the chest, or the person that cursed the best and got their way or was the loudest, won. And to now be able to take a step back, therapy helps quite a bit, and pause and be able to really discern what's actually needed here. Is this a person that doesn't operate in that arena and needs to be put in their place, for lack of a better term, right? Like, if you're going to call me a little girl, you got to be prepared to take it, right? But also, are there times where I can be that example of the empathy and the compassion and, dare I say, love in the workforce? And I have an example I'd like to share, because I had a difficult thing come up and I was afraid to take time off to deal with that difficult thing. And it was coming right up against a deadline that was impossible to begin with. And there was a lot going on. And a month before that deadline, I just really needed that time. And I asked a leader and a colleague about taking that time. And the amount of love and care that they showed me in my time of need helped me want to come back after those 2 weeks with more excitement and enthusiasm to do my work, because I felt loved by my teammates, and dare I say by my leader. We can call it care if that's like not PC. But my leader cared about me and wanted me to be okay. And when we see leaders who care, it makes it easier to ask for that time, where I needed some time to heal. And I could come back and still do great work. I just needed to rest, which then goes on a whole long story about our culture of productivity and how we're afraid to rest. And we don't have to go there, but it's all very important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We actually have just a little bit of time if there is some questions from anyone else here in the audience or comments. Or anyone on Zoom? Yes. Sir, I'm going to bring the microphone to you so you can introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Phil Sasan. I'm sorry we got here late, so we might have heard very powerful statements that Bill made before we got here. And I brought a friend who had never heard of the Bible, Bill's instrument. You know, it's really interesting listening to the story. And I say that with some thought in terms of the content of the remarks that were made at the meeting. And so I took some of the notes that I did. You have to bear with me. Today is not my day. We went to a restaurant instead of home. But you said, you know, it's very well known. I'm sorry. And then I had the mask on as well. There
We're
we go.
making it difficult.
I'm
You're doing a
sorry.
great job.
You know, the idea of with great wealth comes great responsibility. You know, we've all heard that, all of us, no matter where we are. And I really think outside of the box when you mentioned it here today. I realized how far out of the box I am, because I immediately flipped it. And I came up with great responsibility comes great wealth. Sorry, with great responsibility comes great wealth. Baha'u'llah says, having attained the stage of fulfillment and reached his maturity, man standeth in need of wealth, and such wealth as he acquired through crafts. Would you like to respond?
Thank you. That's Mr. Phil Sasan.
I mean, call me silly. Can you say the question in a different way for me? Because I don't know if I fully understand what exactly the question is.
I think the overall question regarding the disparity of poverty and wealth in this country is that we often think top to bottom. And we always start at the top and we think of how it affects the bottom. We don't reverse it and say, let's go to the bottom and see how it affects the top. The entire administration order of the Baha'i world community is really a bottom to top kind of organization. So it's really a model for all our endeavors. So I guess my question is, how would you consider your individual perspectives in that light? Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's actually a beautiful question about knowing that we are all connected to each other. You know, the actions that somebody makes in a, let's just call it a boardroom somewhere in New York, it will affect most probably somebody in every country, almost everywhere. So, you know, we spoke a little bit about, you know, thinking as leaders, making decisions that have in mind all of humanity. And I think that's probably the best that you can do, because decisions are complicated things, and the way they impact everybody is likely not to be known for a little while. So if your intentions are pure and then you follow through with your decision and you watch the impacts that it has and you allow for mistakes to be made and you change them, I think that's probably the best that you can do when you're thinking about it from how could this decision or thing that I'm doing here impact somebody somewhere else that I didn't even see. But just knowing that it could impact them and keeping that in mind in the initial decision, I think would be totally different than what happens today.
I'm going to talk about how your comment affects me in terms of philanthropy. I've been a philanthropist for about 7 years when I really started accumulating great wealth, and we've given away over public health. So, philanthropy traditionally is the philanthropist comes in and tells the community what to do. The philanthropist comes into the community without consulting and says, here, you need this, or here, you need that. And the philanthropist has a disproportionate amount of power. To your point, we need to involve communities. So over time, I've learned over the last 7 years to shift it. And now what I do is I look for communities that need money in order to fulfill their aims, not mine. And I do look for communities whose aims are aligned with mine. There's no shortage of that. But I'm very careful now, every time I go in, to ask them what do they want, how are they thinking, and then to stay out. And I think that that's very important, that we do this in every aspect of our lives. And there's another principle that occurred to me, again, from your question. That is the concept or the principle of Baha'i consultation. So when you run a business, or when you run a nonprofit, or when you're running any kind of organization, utilizing consultation. And what consultation, it's a very specific term in the Baha'i faith. And that means everyone puts their ideas out there. And as soon as that idea leaves your mouth, it's no longer your idea. The ego is gone. And that also evens out the room, because what you're really talking about, again, you mentioned bottom up versus top down, is that everybody's opinion matters. Except for my partner who's calling me right now. His opinion matters, not just at this moment. But so everyone's opinion matters, and that's how we run our company. And I believe it's a much more effective and truthful way to run the company. There's many instances. I'm thinking of one little story from the Baha'i faith, and that is there was a man who was illiterate, who was in Persia, and a great Muslim scholar came upon him. And this man who was illiterate, who was a Baha'i, asked such a profound question to this Muslim scholar, who had initially dismissed this illiterate man who was sweeping the floor, that it made him study the Baha'i faith. Just this one man. And this man, this great Muslim scholar, became a great Baha'i scholar because of this one thing that this man, so this man who was You know, basically, if you took the two men in society, one was here and one was here, yet the man who was supposedly down there affected this man who was way up there. And we should look at everybody as being noble. One of the things we're doing with movies, everybody's noble. And all of our movies, all of our TV shows are about that. Whether you're a person of color, whether you're a woman, we have what we're making now called The Senior, about a 59-year-old man who made a college football team. We're against ageism, we're against sexism, we're against racism. The whole point is that we're all human beings and we all matter. And I love your question. Thank you for your question. And hopefully that answers it partially.
No, we're crunched on time, but I think ultimately it's interesting you mentioned consultation, Steve, because I think representation in that consultation, right? Like, who are the people that are a part of that group that's consulting about?
We have a question from Zoom. Oh, yes, we'll come to you in a second. Can I grab this one from the Zoom? Okay, wonderful. We have a question from Nava Moore. He has the same name as I do, except he's a man, a black man. So when we stand next to each other, he's actually a friend of mine. Sometimes businesses sacrifice ethics for profits. How does one balance the profit needs of a business with doing the right thing that may cost the business money?
I feel like we talked about it earlier, right? Like, do the right thing. This is hard to say, and I'm very curious what your thoughts are, because I'm not in this position. So I'm well aware that it's easy for me to talk about my passionate thoughts. But if we are running, question one was, what does it mean or look like to run or work within a business that has spiritual purpose? What is it? What is it that it's going to cost the company? Is it something that it's the truly right thing to do and it's going to be okay? Is it not? I mean, I don't.
Give you an example. So we were doing a podcast. We're doing a podcast called, and one of our people tested positive, and the guest was on his way. If we kept it quiet, we would have saved $50,000. So I had a very quick discussion with Jamie, who at the time was not our president. He's now president of what now Senate. And Jamie and I had literally about a less than a minute conversation. And then my question to Jamie was, what's the right thing to do? He said, "Right thing to shut down." We shut down. Turns out it was a false positive. So the person who came would have been just fine. So we could have taken the risk and had the person come, but we shut down the production for the day, cost ourselves $50,000. I never regretted that. I would make the same decision. It was a very quick decision. My answer always, if you know, let's actually $1 million and get away with it. I believe in instant karma. The second you do the wrong thing, you've lost. The second you do the right thing, one, money is not really that relevant. Now, of course, as a billionaire, I could say that easily, but I really believe that if you take away all my money tomorrow, I'd still say the same thing. Always do the right thing. At the end of the day, we're on this world, but for a short time. We live for an eternity. Remember that.
I think a lot of that also impacts your integrity, right? Like, just because you may have lost money because you maybe made a poor business decision at the time, but it was the right thing to do. I'm a firm believer that you walk away with your integrity. People will know that. And I always play the long-term game. So you might have lost that short-term game, but I'm confident the long-term game will be.
So, you know, Nava and I, again, I hate to keep harping on the fact that we have a small company, but we are sometimes put in positions where making the right decision is like extremely painful, right? Like, oh my God, we might lose it now. But, you know, we can honestly say every time that has happened, we have done the right thing. We, you know, employees, you know, having few employees at the beginning, having somebody have a severe family thing and, you know, having to deal with that at the last second puts us in a very precarious position. Sometimes we've, you know, again, it was never a question of, should we do this right thing? It was always, yes, let's do it and have faith that we make it out the other side. So, I can say so far we've done it, and it's worked out okay.
Yes. Oh, there we go. Okay, yes, please, sir.
Oh yeah, sure. I guess in summary, we've talking about bringing spirituality to business and leadership, activity, our approach, our mindset. And the question I left, well, I guess the opposite of that, and kind of what stands in the way. What practical advice do you have for managing your ego, especially when you've had a little bit of success moving forward?
Well, the concept.
No, we're not allowed to hug, but I would hug you right now.
Yes. Please. And I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself? Shidan, thank you so much.
I just go home to my wife and she helps me with that. She's very helpful.
In addition to that, yeah, definitely, consultation, but the biggest thing that has helped me honestly is reading, like reading a variety of books on a variety of topics that are centered around around the ego, and being able to slowly tell what it is that the ego is doing to the decisions that you're making and how that is impacting over the long term. I think the ego is very difficult to understand, but when you can at least start to find out, like, oh, I see how I got to that decision now, or why is it when they're telling me this, like, why do I want to like go hunting or something, I think read and just think about when you're having these things come up in your life, just think about, why is this generating such a response inside of me? That has, in going home to my wife and talking with her about it, has definitely helped as well.
The Baha'i writings say, bring yourself into account, bring thyself to account each day, ere thou art summoned to a reckoning. So every day, every night, you're supposed to bring yourself to account. Turning towards God, and it sounds very simple, but turn your face towards God, pray, meditate every day, especially during COVID. It's been a challenge to all of us. It helps us in many ways, but it does help with the ego. I realize how small I am. God is big, messengers are big, and I am nothing. And the more I turn my face towards God, the more I turn into self-love, that's ego. But the more, if you're crowding God out of your life, then your ego is going to take over. Letting God take over your life and really turning towards God and the love of God helps tremendously.
I have so much to say, but I'm gonna try, like, tap me on the shoulder, kick me if you need me to stop talking. Yes, to what you both have said. And first off, I have to say this, even though it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important to say the uncomfortable things. I love that your women play that role for you, but I know so many women that are exhausted playing that role. Emily Baldoni being one of them that shared that on the Wonderful Man Enough podcast. So yes, and not saying don't do that. I'm saying yes, and continue to learn, continue to turn to God, and yes to all of that. And practically speaking, if I can turn to you, because I see you're a young man as well, and I have a soft spot in my heart for young people as well. Eckhart Tolle's books talk about the ego being the pain body. And I also follow the holistic psychologist who talks about the ego not necessarily being a bad thing, but it is a culmination of these painful things that have happened to us. And so on a practical level, do whatever it takes to heal that pain. It can be therapy, it can be meditation, it can be yoga, it could be walking in a park, it could be music, it could be whatever helps you with that. one of the things that has helped me on my journey practically, because if I'm honest, and I'm not trying to play picture perfect here, it's hard for me to turn to God when I'm angry, really angry. And to be honest, and I censored myself because I've asked 2 individuals to keep me, if I curse, I have to give money to the fund today. So I'm trying really hard to control myself. No, I'm gonna say it anyways, and I'm gonna donate. I get angry AF. It's hard. It is very hard. And I know that's coming from my ego. I know that's coming from my pain body getting so activated, particularly when my voice is not heard. Oh my God, I'm a woman. How many times did I get angry in this world, right? But what I realized when it was hard for me to turn to God was there's a spiritual concept in many faiths that talks about us being a hollow reed. And I don't know if I was a hollow reed because I had, and those in my personal life know, I talk about the gunk a lot. I have all this gunk of pain, of expectations that weren't met, disappointment, being a woman in the world, like you name it, whatever it is, right? But if I'm really going to be that hollow reed, that vessel for whatever divine spiritual kind of guidance and vision or cause to work towards, am I working on hollowing out that reed? For me, that's therapy, meditation, yoga. There are so many other things, right? But for me, I've had to do that inner work and dig at that gunk and really hollow out that reed and the cobwebs and the baggage and the yuckiness of it all that was making me so angry. You hear what I'm saying? So it was driving my ego because there was pain. And I did really well in the corporate world because I was driven by that pain amidst a ton of other people that had these big ass egos. That's another one. Huge egos that were driving their survival as well. I want to, again, that's that old arena we were talking about. I want to operate in that new arena that doesn't have pain bodies walking around, that has these hollow reeds, that are businesses that are based on these spiritual principles that are not mutually exclusive, right? It can be one and the same. But if we as individuals aren't working on our ego, not completely taking it away, but recognizing, hey, the ego is this protective thing that is in place for a reason. Why is it there? What is it serving? What purpose has it served me? I know mine was survival. And I had to get to a place where I was no longer driven by my, some days I'm driven by ego, but I had to get to a place where I'm committed to hollowing out that reed so that I can make way for God to finally be like, I was trying to get to you. You had all that gunk in your reed. What the heck? So hopefully getting yourself to a place where you can be that vessel driven by your spiritual values and morals as opposed to your ego.
That was an awesome question. We're going to take one more. Oh, we got 3 questions. Start here first. And, what we'll do is just 1 or 2 things that might be explanation of this question. Please answer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline. I'm a friend of Bita's. First off, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I want to thank all of you for sharing your time and your talent with us, and as well as our generous hosts for putting this together. So I think the fact that we're even having a conversation of business and spirituality as 2 separate things is in part because we live in such a scarcity mindset. And, you know, we talked about women putting other people down because there are limited spaces at the top and, you know, competing for more money. And, you know, it's a rat race out there, all those different, you know, sayings out there. And I think that's the path that we're building to go from scarcity to abundance. But as a person in business, as a leader, how do you practice that? And how do you instill that value in your culture? Great question.
Why did I invite her asking these hard questions?
would like to respond to that?
I think you should respond on behalf of us. On behalf of me and you, I mean. I'm not saying all three of us, but on behalf of, because this is something that this is lead in
Then I
our
want to be
company.
extra clear. Could you just say that last part of your question so that now that I've responded on behalf of my husband, I should probably do a good job.
So how do you instill the value of abundance over scarcity? This and just
I think first, one of the major things that Blake and I do in both of our businesses is making sure that we're letting know the people that we collaborate with, that we work with, they're being listened to. And what I mean by that is that they're letting us know what are their dreams, what are their aspirations, what are their skills. And we talk to them about how we can see a path for them to achieve all of that within the organization, so that they understand that they're not coming here with the hopes of, would I be able to do this? Or I don't feel like I'm, this is not the space that I want to be a part of. And then on top of that, we talk to them about all the different other ways that we see them progressing within the organization, making sure that they have a voice, that when they're, when we have our meetings, they're making, even though they're not managers, they're making managerial type decisions, so that when we're actually operating, they're taking an ownership of how our company operates. And in that way, there's not this, there's not that idea of scarcity, because we're offering a space where we understand that this company is with all of you, and all of you have a part to play in this. And that if you have desires, you have wishes, you have things that you want to communicate, that you want to see get done in this organization, it's our job as leaders to make sure that happens for you. And I think in that way, some of that happens with us. I don't know if you have comments or anybody else.
I think to add to those conversations, I love that you talk about dreams, right? And whether we would want to call them dreams or goals, whatever is appropriate in the context. Oftentimes that scarcity mindset, my understanding is it's coming from a place of lack. And I don't hate it, but I'm going to harp a lot on the emotional EQ side of the house and therapy, because we all need it. But I also wonder, where does that sense of lack come from someone on the team, right? And not everyone can do that, and that's fair. But what I can say, and my team can hold me accountable, is I'm asking about their well-being and their life and their goals or their dreams. Because I know that, and I tell this all the time to people that interview for our company, we're a team of rock stars, right? Like, this is not an easy, laid back thing for you to kind of come be a part of. And so as results of having a demanding job, it's important that these people are healthy and that their well-being is taken care of. And so if there is a sense of lack, hopefully being a leader that cares about where that's coming from and having the emotional intelligence and the empathy and the compassion for people on your team and leading by that example will help.
Comes from the top, vision. So darkness is the absence of light, cold is the absence of heat, evil is the absence of good. So the scarcity is a mindset, and it's an understanding, it's a fear that we're not going to be enough, not going to have enough. And so clearly elucidating, clearly telling people what the vision of the company is, clearly telling people that we have a future, clearly telling people that you have a future with us, that we're all in this together, and really outlining that vision for the employees. It comes down to leadership to some extent. And again, I said this before, work on yourself first. Like we say in the airlines, you have to be able to put that mask on yourself first and make sure that you have that idea. But I believe that every problem, every major problem in the world is a spiritual problem. Start with your own spirituality. If you're a leader, start with your own spirituality. The more you have, because you're mainly, as I said up front, we're mainly spiritual people. The greater your spirit is, that you're taking care of it, the less your employees, the less the people that are working with you will feel that lack. That lack starts with you, and the abundance starts with you.
Okay, I think yes, Negar. Negar, no.
Hi, so my name is Nagar. I'm a cardiothoracic radiologist. And a lot of what you have been talking about has resonated with me. And I've had a little bit of a difficult time organizing my thoughts, but basically what I wanted to talk about is my field is 25% or less female. I've had a whole range of colorful experiences, which I won't go into, but one of the things that I've observed is that I think the men in medicine in particular, in law maybe, in other fields are profoundly wounded. They're very unhealthy. And we are being, as physicians, we are also socialized to be wounded and unhealthy in the same way. So from the beginning of training, you are deprived of your family. You're deprived of your roles in your family. If you have children, you won't see them. If you know, and this is by design, right? And you're made to work extremely long hours, and you know, you just tough it up. So you're basically taught to subjugate your own feelings. They're not important. You need to put them aside. And consequently, I think this leads to a group of people who generally lack empathy. They're unable to be empathetic to other people's pain. And I was one of 9. I was the only female on the board in my old practice. And I watched the board take away the employees' bonuses, which were a substantial portion of their income. But for us, the partners, made probably 1 dinner's worth of difference. I kid you not. It made no difference, but they did it anyway. And just, you know, things like, oh, having a child is a choice. It's not, you know, we don't want the women in our group to have children because then we have to take their call, you know, this kind of thing. And I guess what I have also 19 and 21-year-olds, and I see that their generation of boys is different, not across the board, but to a large extent. But I wonder how it is that we're raising our children, but in particular our boys, to where they can't be what they need to be because they can't feel, because it's been too painful for them to feel. And that's what I wonder, is how do we heal the adult males amongst us who are in that zone, and how do we raise our boys so that they're not in that place, and how do we change our workplace culture? And I feel like COVID has done some of that, but we're still really far from that place. So
Thank you. And then we'll have one more question after this from Prabhakar.
As Nav and I raise a little boy right now, I can attest to the fact that he is an extremely emotional being, extremely emotional. And I know growing up that I was the exact same way. So, you know, I don't know, how do we rid it in the workplace right now? I have probably no place to have an opinion on that, never been in that position. Maybe it's not possible, but I know for how do we raise the next generation of boys to not have that disconnect with their own emotions, is to do the difficult stuff when he's having we call them big feelings. When he's having big feelings, to talk to him about it, and to not quiet, stop, you know, to allow him to feel that, and then to try and articulate what it is that he is feeling, so that we can show him, okay, we can either fix it, or maybe that's something we can't fix right now, and you're just going to have to move past it, but we do understand. And I don't know, I think that's all we can do, is to just increase the understanding of what our emotions are, not as these like esoteric things that our body goes through and we have to like freak out and, you know, throw ourselves on the floor, but like, okay, I'm feeling something, I'm figure out where it's coming from. And it has to start at the grassroots with the kid. You know, I think by a certain time we probably get so wounded from shoving things down that maybe we can't fix it. I don't know. It's hard.
The first thing that comes to mind is why those little boys inside of these grown men are hurt. And there's so much reason, if I'm honest. It's really easy to want to say, which tangent, how amazing that during a conversation about spirituality, they're not now talking about ego, and mental health, and all of
Raising
this,
the
and raising-
boys that will be part of these businesses.
I love it. So, and I think part of that is recognizing the things that do men. I think part of that, I think women do want to be those like safe spaces for their men. But I know Justin's point, both in his book and in the Man Enough podcast, which is an incredible one you should listen to if you haven't already. And I'm not part of any, that's a complete random listener. And I have nothing to do with Mayfair Studios or anything. But I mention that because they talk about this. And I think it's an important conversation to continue to have. And women have a place in this conversation as well as men, in the sense that I forgot which episode it was where they talk about grown men, not just the little boys, but grown men not having a safe space to unravel. Because we expect men to have it all together, to have it all figured it out, to be the strong one in the household or whatever. And if you want to interrupt me, I really don't.
No,
I can feel your passion right now.
I just wanted to add when you're ready.
Yes, and so part of that is, do men create those spaces for other men? Do women create those spaces for men? Yes, and right, yes to all of the above. And one thing that I have to say, because I want to always make things as practical as possible too, because it hasn't been an easy journey even for me. And I hated going to events and not being able to take practical nuggets. If you have not learned about nervous system regulation, get on it, right? Like if you can teach your little boys when they're having the big emotions, and your little girls when they're having the big emotions, to regulate their nervous system, so that then when they are adults and in uncomfortable conversations, situations, whatever it may be, they can learn to self-regulate and trust themselves. Because we have outsourced so much of what we're supposed to know. Teachers are supposed to tell us how to live our life. God bless teachers, I'm not knocking teachers, right? Have parents done their job in teaching the kids what they're supposed to learn, spiritually, emotionally, more, all of it, right? Nutritionally, all of it. And if we haven't taught our kids how to regulate themselves, we are doing them and humanity a disservice, because we have some unregulated people walking around wounded, not knowing what the first step is to even work on it. Because we can talk about meditation all day long. It's hard to sit there and turn off a brain that for 20, 30, 40 plus years has just been going on, autopilot for so long. So learning how to fly that plane ourselves when we weren't taught how to do so is important.
I agree with everything that everyone has said. And what's so interesting is that the concept of the equality between men and women, people don't realize it. We don't realize it. We forget the inequality between men and women actually does a great disservice to men in very different ways to women, but it does just as a great disservice to men. Why? Because from the moment they are born, and there's actually stats. I read this book called Raising Cain, child psychology course, that actually talked about how infant boys cry more than infant girls, that they actually have this range, this full range of spectrum of emotion, but somehow down the track of society, we tell them they have to shut that off. And the reason we have to tell them to shut that off is because they're not supposed to exhibit female-like qualities. What are female-like qualities? Expressing one's emotions, crying when they're hurt, basically it's misogyny that's at the root of it. One thing that Blake touched on and that we're really trying to do with our son, if you go and you look in his bookcase, all his books are about the glory of women and the feminine qualities, the glory of the feminine qualities. Why do we do that? I mean, there's nothing in there about anything about men. Just why are women so beautiful? All of those books that were made for girls were showing him. Why? Because we want him to be able to embrace feminine qualities. We want him to be able to not to live in this society where misogyny is just steeped right into it, but walk through it being appreciative and to value the qualities that a man needs to be able to work through their wounds. And if they don't, then it causes a lot of the pain that we're seeing here today, which is then reflected onto their marriages, reflected onto their friendships and their relationships in the workplace as well.
Men are taught to hold our emotions inside that from a very young age, and it's not working, by the way. If you go to the colleges, because I have my 2 kids in college, 60% of the students are now women. Men are struggling greatly. And in the high schools, men are struggling academically. And it's not that, women are just as smart as men. Men are just as smart as women. Why are the men struggling? Because emotionally, they're not able to handle it. We don't talk. We're training our young boys not to talk. We're training them to play video games. We're training them to do all sorts of things, just like we did when we were their age. Maybe we didn't have as many video games, but we played sports. We didn't really talk. We talked, yeah, sure. We talk about the sports. We talk about maybe business, but how often do men really go deep? And that's what Justin's doing with Man Enough. We need to do this for our sake. We are not thriving. We need to do this as a society. And we need to embrace some of those feminine qualities and not be afraid. Not be afraid. And I'll say this publicly. In many ways, I'm the more effeminate of mine. I've been married for 25 years, and my wife is 5'1". So it's interesting to hear a 6'6" man say this. But she likes the violent movies. I don't. She's the one who's more competitive than me. She's definitely the more aggressive of the two. She definitely has more of a temper out of the two. But she has a lot more traditional male qualities, and I'm the one who likes the sensitive movies. Just who I am. I fully admit it, and I don't mind that. But I'm also a man in many ways, and so you can have female characteristics and admit to it and still be a man. And I don't consider myself effeminate necessarily. I just have some feminine qualities, and we should lean into who we are and not be afraid. And that's the biggest thing. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have time for just one more question. Prabhakar, would you be able to? Thank you.
Hi, this is Prabhakar. Yeah, my question should be pretty short, so hopefully I'll be straight to the point. But I'm curious, and like to hear from you, Steve, but also Blake and Peter. I'm in a position as well right now where we're starting a new company. I'm curious how you're with Wayfarer Production, how you think about being a spiritual organization with the so communicating that to the employees from the wider community. Some little bit deeper with that, please.
So we right up front, we listed out the Baha'i principles. We're not going to get too deep into it. That's the one thing you don't want to do is ever make anyone think that they have to be a Baha'i to work for you. We made it very, very clear. One person was very scared. The employee was gay. How is that going to affect me? Or do you care? And we, of course, didn't care, and she's been promoted. And we have to tell people that they're safe, that they don't have to be Baha'is. They don't have to believe in everything that the Baha'i faith teaches. We don't tell people what to believe. What we do tell people is that there's principles we live by. And these principles cross all religions and no religions. And honesty is something that all people live by. So I think talking about the universality of these principles and how they affect the business positively and how they affect our working atmosphere positively, and talking to other Baha'is. Layli Miller has been very helpful. If you're familiar with Layli Miller, we would be happy to share those principles with you. If you're starting a new business, you can definitely take our principles. I'm sure we can get you. I won't talk for Layli. She might say something different in terms of, I don't want to talk for anyone else, but I think laying those principles out very clearly for employees right up front, and then definitely telling people you don't have to be a Baha'i. You don't have to. You could be Muslim. We have people of all faiths. We have Muslim and Christian and Jewish and Baha'i and atheist, and men and women and gay and straight. And you know what? Those are not important things to us. how well do you do your job? And are you respectful? One of, there's some things that we do require, and that is that every person who works at Wayfair treats everybody inside and outside the company with respect. And we have some employees who are no longer with us who couldn't do that. And then another thing is putting diversity in. We talked a lot about diversity here today, but really putting that in as a value of the company, not just, hey, we want to do this, but if we're going to be who we are, who we really are, our authentic selves, diversity is a piece of it, built right into the fabric of the company.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming down, and thank you to our panelists. And thank you to all of you. Thank you for Thomas helping out with the audio over there, and Sina over here helping us out with Zoom online and all of that. Thank you, everybody. We want to invite you to some refreshments that are just around the corner. And just a note, of course, this was, if you're moved by any of the thoughts about contributing to the advancement of women in the workplace, this is a family and a group of people that I know many here support a foundation we call the Mona Foundation, which actually works to support the education of impoverished girls around the world. They take that education and they use it to create businesses and jobs to support their families. If you ever feel so inclined, 100% of whatever anyone would ever feel like donating, if you wanted to, there's a box over there. 100% of it actually goes to these girls. So I don't know many nonprofits that actually can say that. So please, we welcome you to take a look as well and have a conversation and enjoy. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know. Love to you all. Thank you.